Welcome back to um, Biblical Hebrew Video on Demand series. Uh, we went in teaching. We went into the Hebrew nouns and briefly went over the masculine and feminine singular endings. Of course, the masculine normally doesn't have. It's called endingless nouns. And went through the feminine and showed the different feminine endings, both singular and plural, and the dual nouns on both masculine and plural, and the masculine plural nouns. So let's go a little bit further into the basic patterns of noun pluralization. You probably noticed that most nouns undergo a significant vowel changes with the addition of plural endings. For example, we can observe the vowel changes from the singular of the melech, which is a seglet noun. The accent is on the first syllable instead of the last syllable. And it gets that name because of the segols. You got segol under your mem and segol under your lamed. Although seglet nouns don't have to have all segols, they tend to most of the time have segols there, both under the first and second syllable. But when you take melech, which is a masculine noun and singular, and you convert it to a plural, it becomes melachim. In fact, there's very few nouns pluralized that aren't altered, haven't altered the vowels of the noun stem in some way. And so these changes are occasioned by a shift in the accent and the change of the syllable structure when the plural endings are added. So what's happened is another syllable has been added to what already existed in the root of the word. So instead of having, if you had two syllables, when you add the plural ending, you have three syllables. So remember, the Hebrew nouns normally are accented on the final syllable. That what we learned was the tonic syllable. And then if you go back from the furthest left to the back to right, you'll see you got your pre-tonic syllable, which is right next to your tonic, and then your propotonic syllable. So basically here, we're going to go through and learn these vowel changes and that occur. And one of the reasons for this is that you get an understanding of the vowel changes, why they change. And also, remember the bigger pictures that we remember, we memorize so we can recognize, and so that we can eventually be able to read the Torah, the consonantal text on the Torah scroll without any vowels and understand. So you'll become so familiar with this that you will just see it on the page and it's just part of you. The first rule is the pluralization with no change. Now, this usually occurs. There are a number of nouns that are pluralized simply with the addition of the masculine or feminine plural endings. In other words, there's no changes in the vocalization pattern of the noun itself. So we have shir, which is song. All we do is, to make it plural, we add the hirik, yod, mem, sofit, or final mem at the end, and it becomes shirim for songs. There's no change in the vocalization of this hirik yod. It's not reduced down to anything. It remains the same. Same thing with ot for sign. When we make it from a plural noun, we take it into a feminine plural, singular noun to a feminine plural. It goes otot. And so nothing has changed with the basic vowel in the root right here. Now, nouns of this type may be composed of two syllables with shavah or hatef patak in the first syllable and an unchangeable long vowel in the second syllable. So let's go ahead and look at the second series where they don't change at all. Okay, we got chalom for dream and chalomot for dreams. Nothing has changed in the root here. It's still the same. The only thing that has happened is that we've added the feminine plural ending to the noun. Rechov for street, rechovot for streets. Just added the plural ending onto the noun. Nothing has changed with the root. in the vowel. There's been no vowel reduction. And so those are what verbs, those are the nouns that had no, when we add a plural ending, there's no vowel reduction in that root right there. So, and the second part is pluralization with proprotonic reduction. There are two syllable nouns that are accented on the final syllable and have either comments or serrae in the first, or pretonic syllable will experience what is called proprotonic reduction with the addition of plural endings. So what we're going to see here is that davar, which has both comments here, becomes devarim. So what happens is when we add this hirik yod mem safit, this masculine plural ending, onto this noun, we create another syllable here. Instead of being two syllables here, like davar, it becomes devarim, three syllables. So the rule is basically the further away from the accented syllable, the dalet and the shava now have become further away from the accented syllable, so that comments reduces down to a shava. And that's what it is. It's because you now have three syllables, and this dalet is no longer a pretonic syllable, but is a propretonic syllable. It's one syllable further away from the accented syllable. Same thing with levav. Levav becomes levavot. The serrae reduces to a shava under the lamed when you add the other syllable, this feminine plural ending, onto heart. It becomes hearts. So basically, rule of thumb, the further away from the accented syllable, the shorter the vowel. Okay? Now, nouns with an initial guttural consonant cannot take a vocal shava, but they prefer a hatef patak. So, if you have a first guttural here, both the ayin in anan and chaser in courtyard, you see anan goes from a comments, and since it can't reduce down to a vocal shava under a guttural, it goes to the hatef patak. Again, you have the hatef patak, and you add the masculine plural ending on, and that comments reduces down to a hatef patak. That's the reduced vowels under gutturals. You got the chaser doing the same thing. Haserot. It just reduces down to the hatef patak. That's all it does right there on that right there. So, note that the nouns with vowel letter, which is unchangeable long vowel in the first syllable, will not experience proprotonic reduction. So whenever you have a unchangeable long vowel, and that's why I was telling you at the very beginning in chapter 2, it's important to know your vowels and what category they're in, whether they're long, whether they're short, whether they're unchangeable long vowels. It's important to know that. And so when you have a noun like kochav for star, and you put a plural ending, a masculine plural ending, kochavim, you see that the whole and vav does not change. It does not reduce down. It remains the same. And so that's the other ones that do not change um, their root, or there's no vowel reduction whenever you add another syllable, which is a plural ending onto it. All right, let's get into the pluralization of seglet nouns. All two-syllable nouns that are accented on the first syllable are classified as seglet nouns. Now, both the masculine and feminine nouns appear in this class. They're called seglet nouns because they typically have two segols, like I mentioned earlier, as in the following examples: Melech for king, Eretz for land or earth, Derek for road or way, Pestle for idol, and Cherev for sword. Now, these other vowel patterns also appear in this class, usually with at least one Segol vowel in the following. And there's some following examples. Safer is a segol noun, although it doesn't have two Segols. It has a Sere Segol. And I mentioned this earlier that it doesn't have to always have double Segols. You can have a Holm Segol, a Seri Segol, a Patak Segol. We even have where it has no Segols. It just has the Patak like in Baal for Lord, or Na'ar for young lad. So they're also segol nouns because they are accented on the first syllable, even though they exhibit a vowel pattern without a Segol vowel. Now, the vowel pattern of the Segol nouns will vary in singular, but they will always have the same vowel pattern in the plural. They will always have the same vowel pattern in the plural. So what we need to do is go through the plural and look at how these change here. Okay? Okay, here it goes. We got Melech. Okay? And Melech in the plural is Melachim. And so you have a Shavah up under your propotonic syllable. So you got your accent syllables tonic here, pretonic, and then propotonic. So it reduces to a Shavah under your propotonic syllable, and then you have your comments under your pretonic syllable, and then you have your last syllable with the plural, masculine plural ending, or the plural ending on it. Same thing for Nefesh, for life. You have the Shavah up under the Nun, the comments under the Pei, the Shin, and then the Hol and Vav Tav, because this is a feminine plural noun here. Lives. Cherev for sword, because it is a guttural and it can't take a Shavah. What do you have? You have a Hatef Patak there, up under the Chet. And so this is a feminine plural. Same thing with Sefer, Sepharim. You have a Shavah up under the Samic. Comments under the Pei, and the Hirik, Yod, Mem Safit, masculine plural ending at the end here. Boker for morning becomes Becharim, mornings. Same thing. The Holam, the changeable Holam, goes down to a Shavah. Zera for seed, Zeraim for plural, for seeds. So the Segol reduces to a Shavah. Same thing for Na'ar for boy, Ne'arim for boys. You see how the accent shifts down to the end. Once it goes from the singular to the plural, the accent shifts and there's a reduction of that vowel to a simple Shavah, or a Hatef, Patak if it is a first guttural on that root. Now let's go to the pluralization of geminate nouns. A geminate noun appears to have only two root consonants. It's biconsonantal, as in the word for people. Actually, geminate nouns originally had three consonants. For example, the Hebrew word for people was originally amam. There are still a few geminate nouns in biblical Hebrew that occasionally preserve both geminate consonants, such as levav for heart. Now, it's a double consonant. The bait is what they call the geminate. It's double. What makes this noun unique in unique class is that the last two consonants of the original stem are identical. The term geminate comes from the Latin gemini, meaning twins. With most geminate nouns, however, only one geminate consonant appears in the spelling of the singular form. When nouns of this type are pluralized, the consonant that originally appeared twice will now be written once with a Dagesh forte. And we learned that a Dagesh forte is the doubling of the consonant. So another way of saying there's two consonants is taking one consonant and putting a Dagesh in it. So you got Amam, to amim. You have one mem that is inside this other mem through the dagesh forte here. Chetz for arrow is chesim. You got that doubling of the sade here with that dagesh forte there. Okay. Chok for statute is hukim. You got that dagesh in there because it is a geminate root. And it's important to remember these geminates because we're going to get into some other geminates when we get into verbs later on. And the same rule applies too in here. So just remember that what you're learning now, you're going to see again a little bit later on. So it's important to get this principle down here. When you add the plural onto a geminate noun, the second geminate letter consonant turns into a dagesh forte, and so that consonant is doubled to the dagesh forte. It's another way of having both of them out there in that. So, okay, let's go into some irregular pluralization. Again, we have irregular nouns. And so we're going to have irregular plural nouns too. And so we got the ish and anashim. We have isha and nashim. Ir, arim. You see how the hirik yod has now become a kametz. Av to avot. You know, the difference here is you got a feminine ending or a masculine noun, feminine plural ending or masculine noun. A bite for house is batim for houses. Bat for daughter is banot for daughters. And we have bain for son, which is banim for sons. Yom for day, and yamim for days. So, you got some irregular pluralizations on here, but you'll become familiar with them as you go through them. Remember our summary, the Hebrew nouns have both gender and number. With regard to gender, a noun will be either masculine or feminine, rarely both. With regard to the number, a noun will be singular, plural, or dual. So, that's one thing that it does in Hebrew that doesn't do in English. Masculine singular nouns are endingless normally, although we do have some masculine nouns that do have some feminine endings and vice versa on the feminine with plural with masculine, but some feminines nouns are endingless also, but that's just few and far in between. Masculine plural nouns have hirik, yod, mem sufit, or final mem as their plural endings. Masculine dual nouns have the im, the patak, the yod, the hirik, and the mem sufit ending. Most common feminine singular endings are kametz hey, but there are others that are attested to as such patak tav, sagol tav, hirik yod tav, and shurik tav. And that's key to know is the tav. That usually tells you that that's feminine. Feminine singular nouns may also be in endingless, like I said. Feminine plural nouns have the ot ending. Feminine dual nouns have the im or the atim ending, where the hay drops out and you got the comments and then the tav and the dual ending. Feminine singular nouns that end in comments hay will not be identified as feminine in the vocabulary sections or in the grammar lexicon. And so, but they just realize that they are feminine. And then, of course, we got all the exceptions, endingless feminine nouns, exception to normal pluralization, where we got the avot instead of avim here. I used to call them transvestite or cross-dressing nouns, but anyhow. And there may be a reason for that too. I think it's very interesting in there, both the feminine and the masculine in our vote. Seemed like Adam was Zakar and Nechava, masculine and feminine. Okay, then you have your special dual nouns. There are a few dual nouns that in the form, but usually are singular in meaning. Like Mayim is dual in form, but translated singular, water. So there is something to the dualness of the understanding of the nouns there. Then you have your irregular stem change nouns, which we went through for Ish and Anashim and Isha and Nashim. So we have the defective spelling of the feminine plural, sometimes with the vav, sometimes without the vav in there. And most nouns undergo a change in vowel pattern with the addition of a plural ending. We saw that happen where it reduces to shavaz on the propatonic syllable, and if it's a guttural on the first syllable, then it's a hatef patak. Okay, well, that seems to take care of everything we need to go into right now. Be sure to study your vocabulary and review the chapter here, and go ahead and go into your homework section, and we will meet back and we'll go through the homework in our next session.